But so far, just to revise, we have gone through understanding what Data Cloud is, how can we ingest the data, how can we transform the data, how can we map the data, perform an identity resolution, calculated insights, segmentation, and today we are talking about activation, which means segmentation that we have done, how the data will go out of Data Cloud, either to Marketing Cloud. In our instance, we are definitely using AWS, but how can it be activated outside of Data Cloud? So today we are talking about Data Cloud segment activation and actions. It's not segmentation, it's segment activation and action. Once we have created the segmentation, then we can go ahead and start pushing those segmentations out of Data Cloud. We're going to look at two things: data activation or activation, data actions, which is another criteria, which is something where we take an action on the data, but we don't send all the data together. What exactly is activation? Now, process of delivering a payload of segmented members and their supporting attributes to the connected target system. In our last class, we discussed about how we can create a segmentation out of your complete database. You may want to send emails to the customers who have high loyalty points but haven't really purchased in the last 3 months, or you want to send email to the customers who have low CSAT score. There can be many more scenarios of segmentation. It not necessarily has to be for sending an email always. It can also be targeted calls, communications from customer service. There are various ways or reasons why we would segment the data. But once you have segmented the data, once you have come to the stage, the next thing and the next natural progression is this data, the segmented data, should go out to the external systems or within Salesforce to take an action on it. Now, your same segment can be activated to different targets. You have to create segment once, and you can activate it at multiple locations. So your one segment can have 3 or more, like 1 or more activations, and they can be different targets. An example here is you have segmented the members. You want to send this list to an email platform. You want to send this list for a web personalization. Even you want it to mail directly. There can be more avenues where you want to send a curated list to your customer service team within the CRM. There are more and more examples. But the idea is segmentation that we have done can allow you for multiple activations. While you're activating the data, you can apply filters as well to the segmentation. Take an instance that we segmented on high loyalty points and low CSAT score. The criteria for us was if the loyalty points are more than 1,000 points and they haven't purchased in the last 3 months, we bring all that data. That's our segment. When we are activating that segment, you have capability to apply filters on top of your segmented data. For instance, you want to create 2 different curated emails, one for the customers who have loyalty points 5,000 or more. You may want to include different kind of products, different kinds of information to engage them and help them burn more credit points in a I would say in a very few transactions. So maybe you have 5,000 points worth of a product or 2,500 points worth of a product, and you want to present both of them as a recommendation to the customer. Versus the customers who have low loyalty points from 5,000 but more than 1,000, you may want to send them a different email. Now, we did a segmentation on a high level where we were able to identify high loyalty point customers. But when we are sending the activation or when you're activating the data, you have an option to apply filter at this stage as well. So you're sending, again, much more filtered information to the external systems. Segmentation versus activation, what's really the difference? Now, segmentation looks at all the possible records under the unified individual that meets the audience criteria. For example, we had a look last time. what is the right unified individual for a preferred color green. In that case, the segmentation looks at both the individuals, individual one and individual two. If it finds any one of them having a preferred color, that means this unified profile or unified individual is picked by segmentation. That's how segmentation works. Versus activation, activation will look at all the records that you have picked from segmentation, and it'll utilize them in an activation. You can of course apply filters, but the filter will be on the unified profiles only. The information that you already have on segmentation, the activation will be on top of it. Plus, you can also choose which individual ID to pick from the record, such as if you're sending the data to Marketing Cloud, you may want to utilize a subscriber ID. If you're sending in a data to Salesforce CRM, you want to use contact ID. If you're sending the data back to AWS, you may want to use customer ID for that matter, so that the external system will be able to identify this information is coming for which customer or which record. You can also choose email addresses. Let's say you have two different email addresses in here, one from individual one and second from individual two. You can also choose which email address you would like to send the email to. So during activation, we can choose which record ID do we need to utilize. We can also choose which email address do we want to send the communications to if we have to. There are two types of activations. One is a segment activation, the one that we are talking about right now, or we talked about so far, where you have a data model object from batch data ingestion, which is ingesting data in a higher volume. After ingesting the data, we create the mapping. After creating the mapping, we perform an identity resolution. After that, we can perform calculated insights if we would like to, but at the end of the day, we are creating a segment. The segment is getting activated. Now, after the segmentation, we can send the data outside using the activation or segment activation. We can push the data to Marketing Cloud. We can push the data to Commerce Cloud, external activation platforms, personalization. Even within Data Cloud, we can activate the data and also to cloud file storages. So these are the various ways how we can send the data outside of Data Cloud. There is another possibility, which is, let's say you're trying to ingest data from streaming. It's a near real-time data coming into data model, coming into data lakes, data model object. Eventually, we can utilize streaming insights or streaming data model to create data actions. Data actions are different from segment activation. Data action, moreover, looks at the key criteria. At what point in time do they have to create an event? If you look at the data action targets, one of them is Salesforce platform event, other is a webhook, which again will lead to some sort of event generation, and the third is Marketing Cloud. We can inform the external system either to send a communication from a Marketing Cloud perspective, or a push notification over a mobile, sending an SMS, creating a platform event in Salesforce, creating a webhook so that the external system should be able to take an action on the analysis or the feedback the data cloud is providing. The best example that I provided was you have a financial system, you're working for a financial organization. They have set up a rule in Data Cloud where they ingest the transactions in near real time every 15 minutes. We are able to look at the window 15 or let's say 30 minutes of window. There shouldn't be, if there shouldn't be more than $10,000 worth of transactions. If there are, raise a platform event which can notify Salesforce. Salesforce can raise a case, or Salesforce can notify, I would say, cybersecurity team or threats management team, where they can take further actions from there. This is an example of using a streaming data actions versus segmentation. Segmentation activation will look at the wide variety of data, and it can give an output of multiple records with various different attributes. Versus data actions are very limited to sending an event to an external system or Salesforce platform where it can take further action from there on. Naturally, data actions will have less information compared to segment activation. It can only look at the near real-time data, and the attributes are also very limited to what's available in the streaming data model object. Move on to the next one. Segment activation versus data actions. What's the difference? Typical use case for activation is usually marketers who wants to get the segmented information outside of Data Cloud, either for web personalization or for sending emails, SMS, marketing communications, versus the data action is for architects, data engineers, data aware specialists. These are the ones who configure the data action, but not necessarily a marketer or business team will come in and configure a data action. It's more tech savvy. Hence, technical persons such as data engineers, architects should be able to come in and configure the data action. The usage is activation is a process that publishes a segment to activation platforms. That's the usage for it. And the data outside of Data Cloud can be leveraged for many various purposes. Versus data action is a process to send alerts and events to the target system, such as Salesforce or any other external system, where those systems should be able to consume that event, subscribe to that event, and then take further actions based on that event. Timing scheduled activation for larger segments with millions of profiles. So we can schedule an activation. Activation can run every few hours, I think once or twice a day or more or less, but it can have millions of profiles and send the data out in millions from Data Cloud to an external system. Versus with data actions, the key focus is just really on event-driven architecture, where Data Cloud should be able to inform an external system. An external system should be able to process from there and should be able to take further actions. Primary focus is for activating the data with the relevant profiles, attributes, and matrices. That's important. We are not just sending the profile, we are not just sending the individual information, but we are also sending the attributes which the external system may or may not have. Because we have unified the data within Data Cloud using identity resolution, now we have a holistic information about the customer, about the individual. We may have multiple email addresses, we may have multiple phone numbers. Hence, this activation process can look at the whole of the data, can pick the data from various different data points, and then send it across to an external system, along with the matrices, calculated insights that we have created within Data Cloud. Hence, the external system will receive a much more richer data than what they have sent to Data Cloud in the first place, if they have ever sent to Data Cloud. For the primary focus for data action is to generate a near real-time event and insights a channel, trying to give an information to an external system what should happen next based on the chain of events. Payload context for activation. Activation sends the Data Cloud IDs to the activation targets. It can be a unified ID. It can also be an individual ID. It decorates the audience with contact points, such as multiple email addresses. You can pick one of the email addresses from various different email addresses you have based on your source. So you can choose whether CRM will always receive. You should always populate an email from CRM, marketing, etc. You can append attributes and insights. That's the payload of activation. So activation can have a richer payload versus payload in data action is very limited to real-time insights and also what's available within that particular streaming. That's about it. You cannot send much more richer information using data actions in a payload. Targets, as we discussed, are Salesforce Marketing Cloud, Commerce Cloud, Data Cloud itself, any external platforms, SFTP, buckets using Azure, S3, Google Cloud Storage, etc. Data actions is very limited to platform events, specifically for Salesforce Core. Any external webhook event, you can configure that, or sending the data to Marketing Cloud. And again, in Marketing Cloud, that will be very limited information, informing you about the subscriber ID, informing you about what has happened, and then Marketing Cloud will do the rest of it. what's the high level process for activating the data? Because my instance is not prepared at this point in time, we'll be able to look at the screenshots and get an understanding what activation is and how can we process an activation. When we are doing hands-on exercise, I'll bring these slides again. We'll go through the activation process and we'll do the hands-on together for activation. Activation configuration for activation is a 5 or 6-step process. The first step is creating an activation target. That means configuring Amazon S3 for activating the data. In this case, Amazon S3. In other cases, it can be Marketing Cloud, it can be Commerce Cloud, it can be personalization, etc. I'll try to walk you through the instance as well of what we are talking about. The first step is creating an activation target, which means if I click here, you will see activation target as a tab. For having an activation target, think of it, this is another touch point. The first touch point was data streams, where we are trying to ingest the data. Hence, we first of all created a connector, configured a connector. The connector was available in data stream. Then we were able to ingest the data based on the files or objects that there are in CRM or AWS. Activation targets are very similar, where it's helping us to prepare for activation. Hence, the first thing to know is whether we have an activation target where we can send the data. If I click on new at this point, I don't think we will see any activation target except Data Cloud itself. So if you see you have Data Cloud Loyalty or Data Cloud, this is what the Salesforce target is. We'll talk about it, but this is the only platform where you can activate at this point in time. You can choose S3, but then you have to configure Amazon S3 by going behind the scenes. If I click on cancel and click on Data Cloud Setup and click on other connectors, previously we connected Amazon S3, and for ingestion, if you look, the connected method is source, which means we are trying to source the data, we are trying to ingest the data, versus now what we are trying to do is send the data outside of Data Cloud. So you have to switch tabs from source to target. When you do that, you'll have very limited information available. It's either Google Cloud Storage, Azure, or SFTP. These are the only 3 targets available as an other connector. If you have already connected a Marketing Cloud, such as Marketing Cloud Engagement, Personalization, or Commerce Cloud, it will start showing up in the previous screen. So if you have an active connector and I click on new, besides Salesforce targets, you'll also see, besides Data Cloud, you'll also see Marketing Cloud Engagement, you will see Commerce Cloud, Personalization, etc., to send the data outside to create an activation. So think of it as a next step where you have an active integration running. Now all you need is send the data out, and for that you have to create an activation target before we go ahead and start create an activation. I'm going to choose Amazon S3 from here and AWS S3 target. Click on next. Now here I have to provide the name of the bucket and other information that I had before. Now this is again to send the data out. It can be a different bucket than from where we are ingesting the data. There's no dependency. As you can see, we are trying to configure Amazon S3 again. So I will try to put in the information. I'll put the same Amazon S3 bucket. It doesn't have to be the same for you. For our hands-on exercise, it will be the same, but in reality, it doesn't have to be the same. There's no dependency on the S3 bucket to be similar. There is no parent folder, and we need to have access key and the secret. File format, how do you want the data to be sent to S3? There are only 2 formats available, JSON or CSV. I'm going to choose CSV. And from where, which data space does it belong to? It usually used to give me an error. It still gives me an error, invalid SV credentials. Please check again. I need to review what is going wrong. I'm not able to create any activation since last 4 or 5 weeks in Data Cloud, but this is a process of how we create an activation target. Activation target is, let's say, setting up a connection, setting up a valid connection with an external system, which should receive the data from Data Cloud. So that's step one. Step two is create an activation on the segment. The segmentation that we created in our last class, we create an activation on top of it. If you review the segmentation screen, we have an activation section where you can click on new and you can create a new activation. Activation always has to be in regards to a segmentation. Step three is we select an activation membership. Step four is we select the contact points, we select the attributes, and finally we publish a segment, which means we are sending the data out finally. And from step one to step five, it's all configuration. Step six is actually clicking on the button and sending the data outside of Data Cloud. I think we have screenshots as well in the next slides. There can be wide variety of activation targets, such as cloud file storage, as we discussed. It does require S3 access key and secret. It needs to have following permissions, which we have given as part of our exercise. I'll try to revise it again for you to set up Amazon S3 correctly. Within Marketing Cloud specifically, we can choose which business units can be added or removed. So while doing an activation configuration, we can choose which business units should be receiving this data. And within those business units, which shared data extension should be receiving the data. You can also activate the data within Data Cloud. What that really means is you can create a new data model object. You can push the curated data into Data Cloud. Like we discussed in our last class, segmentation is merely a filter which is yet to be applied. You can see the population, but you cannot see the records that it comes into, that it falls into. Hence, this is a way of curating the data and segmenting the data even within Data Cloud, where if you're performing an activation and you choose Data Cloud as an activation target, all the activation does is publishes the data into Data Cloud data model object, and that data model object can be used into Salesforce flows, APIs, LWCs, etc. So there's a wide range of use cases that we can do within Salesforce core using Data Cloud activation. So think of it, segmentation as a filter, which will give you the number of count. It will not show you how many records are there or what records are there. Activation will give you a list of that record in a separate data model object, which you can look into Data Cloud, which you can use in Salesforce core. You can also send that data outside Data Cloud if you want to. This is a common practice where we do not have a standard connector to send the data out. Think of a scenario where you have a system which doesn't connect to Data Cloud directly. You do not have an activation target. Then Data Cloud data model object becomes a fallback plan where you segment the data, you store the data in a different data model object in Data Cloud, and then of course you can send the data out using APIs, or your external system can just look at the data model object and can ingest the data. External platforms such as Google Ads, Meta, there are Epic Exchange apps on Marketing Cloud, which can also utilize data from the activation target. For Commerce Cloud, it automatically creates an activation target. You don't have to create it when an instance is connected to Data Cloud. The same cases with personalization or interaction studio, where it creates an activation target automatically. So if you're configuring Commerce Cloud or personalization and you go to the activation target, you'll realize the activation targets will already be there for you. Now, these are the screenshots. We will go through this hands-on exercise together, but the screenshots are there for us to understand how the activation happens. It's very useful because I don't have an instance configured at this point in time to the stage how we were last Sunday. So when you click on new activation, you will naturally see the screen where it shows you the name of the the segmentation, high loyalty customers who are not actively purchasing. This was use case 2 for us. It will show you the data space. It also have a summary in here. This information that you see on the left, or you select on the left, will be visible on the right throughout the process of activation. So you have a default data space. You have a segmentation called high loyalty customers who are not actively purchasing. We know that we are segmenting on a unified individual. The publish schedule is don't refresh. This information is coming from segmentation. We know the activation target is AWS S3, where you have a bucket name and you have the platform name as well. This is a prerequisite. So this is a prerequisite for creating an activation. And hence you can come to the stage. You have selected the right segment. You have selected the right activation for you. The next thing for you to select is activation membership. How do you want to send the data out? And here also you have two options. You can either use unified individual or individual. So at any stage, you have an option to choose both. Unified individual, which is your unified profile. You also have an option to choose individual, either way. So it doesn't matter if you have performed segmentation on unified individual, because we have reference to individual at every point in time. Data Cloud provides you capability to even activate data on an individual level. There are downsides of it. You may have duplicates, but certain customers have scenarios where they don't want to activate the data for unified individual, rather than they want to rely on individual itself. As soon as you select a unified individual or individual, you will see the attributes that are included. It's either going to be a unified individual ID, it can be an individual ID depending on your selection. So that's the first step of activation, where we are trying to choose the activation target, the activation membership. The best practice from Salesforce is to use unified individual or the object where we have segmented on. As we click on continue, the next step will be for us to choose the email or phone or a mobile app ID, depending on what we have in our contact points. This brings in information from contact point, such as emails, phones, social ID, your mobile app key or mobile app ID as well. From here, we will be able to select which email address to pick. When you click on edit, and when we are doing a configuration, we'll be able to see when we click on edit, we get an option similar to reconciliation rules. We were able to select CRM over AWS. Similar to that, we can select the source priority order. If the source priority order is established and you have data for the email address from CRM, during activation, it will pick the data from CRM, and then it will look into something else if the CRM doesn't have the data. So it's again a structured process where the first step is to look on the number one priority. If the email address is available, yes, pick it. Otherwise, go to the next one, go to the next one, or go to the next one. So emails, it's not really dependent on, let's say we are trying to activate this information to Marketing Cloud. It's not necessary you have to send the same email address that you received from Marketing Cloud, because now we know a lot more about the customer. We may have 5 or 6 different email addresses. If we have performed a calculated insight as well on which email address is the best performing, again, that's not what Data Cloud does, but that's something we can configure using calculated insight and understand which email address is best suited. From this screen, we can choose which email address from which source can be sent out from Data Cloud. And out of this screen, you will notice that there is second attribute which is being added, which is email address. So you have unified individual, you also have an email address which is being added. When you click on next, before going to next, we have multiple activations. So for Marketing Cloud, you need to have at least one, either an email address, a mobile app, or a phone number. Either we send an email from Marketing Cloud, an SMS, or we can also send a push notification. So any one of these 3 things are necessary. For cloud file storage, we don't really need any of it because it's file storage. We don't know what purpose Cloud storage will use the data. It can have a wider variety of purposes than just sending an email or SMS. Hence, you can use email or phone number, but none of them are required. For personalization, email address or phone number, but again, none of them are required. For activation to external platforms, you can have an email address, a phone number, mobile advertiser ID, over-the-top ID. There can be a wide variety of IDs that are being available. The requirements varies based on where we are trying to activate and what the external system wants to achieve out of it. And based on that, we'll be able to share the contact points with the external system. The contact points has to be configured within Data Cloud as well, which means the data model objects has to be mapped. As long as the data model objects are mapped, you'll be able to see more contact point email options in here besides email. Creating activation with additional attributes. So far, if you see on this screen, we have two attributes, unified individual ID and the email address. As part of the next step, as soon as we click on next, we can get more and more attributes that should be stored or that can be sent out using activation. We can have up to 100 additional attributes. The attributes can be activation membership object, which is unified individual, or individual, the direct fields such as first name, last name, date of birth, etc. They can be from the objects in the data model object if there's a path to that object from the activated object. Basically, the relationship from unified individual, direct or indirect relationship from unified individual to sales orders, to cases, to parking reservations, parking spaces, etc. The relationship can be 1:1 or n:1. We can also send calculated insights because calculated insights eventually resides within the source of the object, the activation membership object. So the look and feel are pretty much the same while we are segmenting the data. It's very similar for activation as well. Fields used in activation can be updated with a preferred attribute name to align with the output with the activation target requirements. What this means is, let's say we have a field called first name in Data Cloud. When we are sending the data outside of Data Cloud during activation, we can also change the label of the field. So instead of calling it first name, we can call it F name or any other thing which is more relevant with your external system. So you have flexibility to change the preferred attribute name for the fields that we are selecting. Calculator insight matrices can be added as additional attributes, giving additional content. We can add dimensional filters to the calculated insights for more granular insights on activation. We can send the calculated insights. We can also send the matrices for calculated insights, such as unified individual ID in this case, individual ID if there's any other matrices as well. This is a screen for adding an additional attribute. If you look at the screen, that will be much more clearer. Direct attributes, I think we had a look at this in segmentation as well. Direct attributes is a direct attribute on what we are segmenting or activating. So in this case, it will be unified individual. Right? So, and this is also called as activation membership. So if I had an option and if I click on it, it'll show me first name, last name, and any other demographic information that is stored in it. I can drag and drop in here, like we have dragged first name, last name, salutation, unified individual ID was already there. We cannot remove it. It's a mandatory field. But you can drag and drop information from direct attribute, which is a field within unified individual. That's what activation membership object is. Then for the second one, anything that is a related attribute. And related attribute can be a sales order, can be a case, can be a parking reservation. When we click on home, we'll be able to see the list. The list will be exact similar to segmentation because segmentation and activation, the membership is same for us. We did a segmentation on unified individual. We are trying to do a segmentation on unified individual. Like we're trying to do an activation on unified individual. So from any object in the data model object, if there's a path to the object from the activated object, what does that really mean is If you have a relationship of any other DMO with unified individual directly or indirectly, directly means you have a direct child for unified individual, or you have indirect child, which is via an individual object, you will see all of them in here. Cases, sales
Okay.
orders,
Okay.
parking reservations, everything, right?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can drag and drop that information in here. So if you see, when we drag and drop, it creates a different section for sales order, and you can see sales order ID, status, confirmation date, etc. is being come from here.
Yep.
Creating activation with related attributes consideration. We can use related attributes for Marketing Cloud and Amazon S3. Others will have limitation on what related attributes we can or we cannot pick. There are certain guardrails and limits that we should be mindful of. We can choose up to 30 activations with related attributes. So we can have up to 30 activations with the related attributes. When I say related attributes, the nested attributes, you don't have any limitation on the direct attributes. Eventually, the direct attributes will be very limited anyways. The related attributes or your related objects, related data model objects, will have a limitation of 30 activations with related attributes. Your segment must contain less than 10 million records. If you have more than 10 million records, you'll not have related attributes option available, or you cannot choose it. You can traverse up to 4 hops for related objects. So you can go from parent case to contact identifier. Just giving an example, but you cannot go further than that. So only 4 hoops are allowed. This is very important, where you only have 90 days of look back window. If you remember, during segmentation, we configure how long do you want to look back to? Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years for standard publish option? For rapid publish, it's only 7 days. But let's assume that you're using a standard publish segmentation, which can look back up to 90 days. It can bring all the data to you. Sorry, which can look back for the last 2 years. It can bring you the segmented data for the last 2 years. But when you're going to activate the data, and assume you are trying to send sales orders, you cannot send sales orders that are more than 90 days older. It will not show up in activation. That's a very important difference between segmentation, where your segmentation can, and standard segmentation can look up to 2 years of data, and it can segment the data. Let's say it segmented 60 records. When you're doing an activation, there's no issue. You can send 60 records in here. So your individual will still be 60. Unified, let's say a unified individual. But if you're planning to send the sales order related to the 60 individuals, you can only look back up to 90 days, not more than that. So you cannot look back for 2 years, get the data and send the data outside of Data Cloud. It will be limited to 90 days. If your sales order is being created in 90 days, that's what will be reflective in your activation. Otherwise, your activation will be blank from a sales order perspective. It will still have an information of a unified individual, of who the unified individual is, who hasn't purchased, let's say, for the last 2 years, but you cannot look for the relevant information, let's say parking reservation or any other engagement history for more than 90 days. Filters on related attributes, different than segmentation filters. So filter is different than segmentation filters for related attributes. It only filters the data. So let's say you're trying to filter on sales order. Let's give me sales order that are canceled. So it will not, in activation, it will not change the count of unified individuals. Your unified individuals will still be 60. But let's say in sales order, within the last 90 days, you had 5 successful sales orders and you had 3 canceled sales orders. So activation will only send the data for the 3 canceled sales orders if you have applied a filter on a related attribute. So you can apply a filter on the individual. You can also apply a filter on the related attributes. When we have the screen in front of you, that might make it much more easier for you to reflect and review. Segmentation filters to find users who qualify for the segment, activation filters to find attributes for message personalization. So segmentation filters are being used to identify who is qualified within the segment. How many people do we want to send the information on? Activation, on the other hand, is it's being filtered to personalize the email a bit further. Like we gave an example of high loyalty points. If the loyalty points are more than $5,000 or 5,000 points, that means we may have to send them a different email that's more on the personalization of messaging versus segmentation. Was the idea for segmentation was to bring me everything which has high loyalty points, and you can, within the activation, you can define further how do you want to send the messages and filter accordingly. Using related attributes, the related attributes are stored in JSON. When we activate the data outside of Data Cloud, we will be able to look at sales orders, for instance. The sales order will be a column within the CSV as we are sending the data outside of Data Cloud in an Amazon S3. There will be a column called sales order. And within that column or within that particular data cell, you will have a JSON. So if there are multiple records, you'll have a JSON structure. And that's how Data Cloud manages of just giving you one row. Within that one row, you'll have the unified individual ID, first name, last name, etc. But then you'll have JSON structure if there are more records. And this JSON structure needs to be parsed outside of Data Cloud for any external system that's ingesting it. With Marketing Cloud, for instance, you can use SSJS or mscript to pass the message for personalization, pass the related attributes message for personalization, and even for journey making during the split if you have to. Let me have a look if I have an example for you. If I do, I will be more than happy to share with you. Okay, here it is. All right, so this is from a different instance, but I was able to activate the data at that point in time. And if you look at it, when the activation is complete, so far what we have read about, we click next, 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 create an activation, create the related attributes. We'll come back to considerations as well. And we create an activation and then we publish it. When we publish an activation, Data Cloud goes back into the dictionary, the directory. In this case, the directory was SaaS Guru Data Cloud Bootcamp. We have 4 files, the same files that we have used for us, which is customers, headers, line items, and products. Data Cloud, if we have given this bucket instance in our activation, we'll look at this bucket, will create a new folder called Data Cloud Activation Output. When I click on it, it will create another folder called Segment Salesforce C360 segment. Within that, it'll have the year, the month, the date, and within that, the hour. So it's quite a folder structure that Data Cloud creates from, first of all, its Data Cloud Activation Output. Segment C360 segment is another folder. Within that, the year, the month, the day, and then the hour, in which hour it has been created. And within that, it shows you the activated data. So I have data for customers parked at EV charging station, high loyalty points, legacy customers who haven't parked. And then, of course, the next activation is in the next hour. If I click on any one of them, and try to give you a preview. So this is how it activated the data, your first name, your last name, the ID. In this case, it's a unified ID. I can replace it with the individual ID as well. Email address was blank for a reason. The version was blank. There was no parking reservations. Should be okay. If you have a look at these 2 columns, I did try to change the header name from first name, last name to F name, L name. That was one of the things which we can do as part of Data Cloud activation. I'll try to find if I have any example of nested records. If not, we'll try to create one for ourselves when we are doing hands-on. Let's see if I have cases. Okay, I do have that here. If you look at this data, it's definitely not parsed correctly or it's not opening correctly, but this is a single column. and it has tried to give me case information. I try to bring in subject, the case type, and the CSAT. And the way it has given me is in a JSON. Within it should be within a same column. For some reason, it's not within the same column for me. As you can see, the columns has flipped there. It has moved to the right, but these three columns are containing the same information in a JSON format, a case information. If there are multiple cases, it'll just have multiple entities or multiple attributes within the case in a JSON format. So when you're activating the data and when you're sending the related information such as cases, sales orders, parking reservation, it can be anything for your use case. You can expect that record as a JSON format, as a related record in a JSON format into one of the columns. And you'll need to pass it always, no matter which platform are you using. And let's discuss on considerations and best practices for activation. The use of filters is different. Segmentation and activation use different filters for different purposes. Segmentation is a holistic filter. When you apply a filter, it will try to reduce or increase the number of count of individual or unified individual records. Versus for activation, it's a bit different. It's needed to personalize and send the relevant data to external systems. Apply filters to a segment to narrow down the audience. Use activation filters to narrow down relevant values within related attributes that personalize your messages, such as you want to send limited sales orders, remit limited cases, any other information that you want to limit and then send across, and can be done using activation filters. Multiple data sources. If you have data from multiple data sources in Data Cloud, use unified individual as an activation membership. Selecting individual instead of unified individual as an activation membership can result in duplicate entries for your count. Now, if we are getting data from multiple data sources and that data is not unified, that means there's no single ID. You'll have multiple unified individuals. And Praveen, that's another thing which you may have to consider because we just discussed about it. If let's say you're trying to bring contact information from 3 different sources, you have to make sure you only get one contact. I mean, only one contact if you're not planning to do identity resolution. If you're trying to bring 3 or 4 different contacts, customers, whatever the terminology is, an external system, if you have multiple sources getting the same information, that means there's a possibility, not a possibility, for sure there will be duplicates within the individual data model object because you have needs from Salesforce CRM, from Marketing Cloud, from Commerce Cloud, maybe from Point of Sale Solution. So it will naturally create 4 individual records for you.
Yeah.
That means when you're trying to activate the data, you'll have duplicate during activation as well. That's why the recommendation from Salesforce is if you have duplicates or if you have data from multiple data sources, then perform the unification, perform identity resolution, which will give you unified individual. That means that one record is being linked to these 4 individual records, and then perform segmentation and activation on it, which will eliminate the number of duplicates. Versus if you're trying to run an activation on individual, you will naturally have duplicates in that scenario.
Yep.
Can we rely on Data Cloud to dictate the correct contact point? Do not rely on Data Cloud reconciliation to dictate the correct contact point. Data Cloud is not designed to rationalize, deduplicate, merge, or pick contact point winner. As we discussed, by default, Data Cloud doesn't do any of it. The reconciliation rule is more of for us to prioritize on which system or last updated or most frequently used. There are multiple ways how we can do reconciliation, but at the end of the day, it helps us resolve the conflict. That's it. It doesn't give us a contact point winner. Being said that, we can perform calculated insights within Data Cloud. We can try to identify whether the data is relevant for us to utilize based on certain points. But Data Cloud doesn't have that functionality out of the box. And lastly, publishing. Stagger publish schedule times for many Data Cloud audiences. Now you can publish the activation at different times depending on your audience, depending on where you're sending the data. But you do have staggered publish schedule options, so you can publish the activation at different points in times from Data Cloud.